Go live here. And go live here. Good morning, everybody. Natalie coming to live. Spirit and coffee. Got my coffee here. Yum, yum, yum. Oh, cheers.
Cheers.
Yay, I get to say cheers to people with coffee. This is fun. Okay, so those of you on Podbean, let me know if you can hear me when you come on. Okay, I don't know what's happening. This broadcast is being paused.
Here are the top search results.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting. Zoom.
Sorry for the delay.
Okay, so hi. Oh, we got new YouTube channel on. Say hi to the people on YouTube. Okay, so I don't know if people on YouTube are going to come on, but I started a new YouTube channel. So those of you guys who want to, good morning, Dust, want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, please do so. I think you could find it if you just type in Spirit and Coffee, but I don't know how the URL works. So I will post it through all of the other outlets. Let's get started. Okay, so I have special guests. You've heard from Curtis before, so you say hi, Curtis.
Hi, Curtis.
Yay. And then say hi, Destiny. Hi, Destiny. Say
Hi, Destiny.
So Destiny's never been on. Destiny is my niece, and she is also a part of what I call the great work that we do. And it's kind of funny because, of course, it's a point of topic in this household all the time, all day, every day. That's all we do. And Destiny is now wants to be a part of this. And also Curtis, of course, is whenever he chooses into it, he can come in here and talk. So I want to talk about ego today because ego just seemed to be floating in my mind this morning. What is the ego? How does it operate? How does it function? And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of stories about the ego. People talk about the ego all the time. Ego this, ego that. What is ego? Is it the demons? Is it this? It's the mind. It's what's keeping us here. It's keeping us trapped in the third dimension. It's keeping us. So I had this idea about the ego, and of course, Curtis and Destiny are going to talk about what it is to them. But I had this thought about freedom, like the free will, like freedom. We were talking about determinism and atheism and how those two can be different. But ego itself, I started thinking, is like, there was a meme about, one is trying to trap you, one is trying to free you. So is love trying to free you and ego is trying to trap you? But I started thinking, well, no, I feel like the function of the ego is to actually remind us that we have the choice to be free. But understanding how to get there is the question, because some people may not identify the ego as this thing that's there to free you. It's there to remind you that you have the choice to be free and live in the freedom. So how do we switch our mindset so that when we look at the ego or when we're perceiving the ego and it shows up, that we can say, oh yeah, that's a reminder that I get to come back to love or freedom. But sometimes the subconscious mind takes over and then you have the ego in operation. You don't even know it. So how do you come to identify it? So that'll be the first question. So how do you guys come to identify when the ego is in operation? Like, what do you guys do? What is your definition of ego first? And then how do you identify when it's in operation? Like, you can tell a story, whatever it is for you. So whoever wants to go first, y'all can. I've never had guests on like this. Make sure you speak up and you can come into the camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the beginning of the journey for me was understanding ego and my own that I was having trouble with. And so just learning how it works, really. And to me, it's the narration of thoughts that just normalize in your daily life, and then which ones that you choose to take a standpoint on and then develop an attachment or an emotion or an identity around that one thought, and then the ego basically is like grabs it, says that's mine. So if you're forming your whole life around I am this, and your ego's just grabbing it and attaching itself. Then once anything disrupts that pattern or that belief of you are that, it could be someone else saying, no, I don't really think you are, or you're more this than you are that. And your whole identity is wrapped up into this one stream of thought. Then to me, it just doesn't work for you.
So that reminds me of the Four Agreements. I know you've read the Four Agreements, right?
Some, not all yet.
Okay. So in the Four Agreements, they talk, or is it? It might be the Tree of Knowledge. It might be the Tree of Knowledge, the voice of knowledge. Knowledge. Okay, I can't remember. Sorry, but whatever in the book, it talks about the mitote and how, like a child. Is it okay? So the Toltec talk about the mitote and the child. This is at least what I'm hearing. It's like you're in this belief that I am like, first of all, I'm a badass, right? Like I'm good. I got this. And then, maybe you're a kid and you're like, yeah, I'm a superhero. And then your parents, you're jumping off the tables, and then your parents tell you, what are you doing? You're ruining things. And then
that was definitely me.
Is that you? Okay. I feel like I probably from your head. So then the mitote is like, it switches the I am, and then the ego is you attach yourself to what other people might tell you are. You take that on as your belief. Yeah. So what was that like? Or what?
Well, I don't know, certain parts of imagination as a kid takes you to doing not always constructive things. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you learn the inner workings of something by destroying it and seeing what it's made of. So just where the path the imagination was bringing me, and then the natural order of things in a household from a parental point of view, like, no, you can't be breaking stuff all the time and figuring out what the remote is, TV, this gets expensive, so they're creating this like rule system, and then develops these patterns in the choices that we make that, okay, this is not okay, and it's not based from then our own generation of free will and imagination and what we're trying to take it to. It's then, kind of formed in with this expectation that your parents have of you in this rule set, and you learn to just like conform to that, or, have punishment. And then you start to like, I don't know, I think that starts to grow a certain insecurity with like the thought process, because if you're told a certain way that you originally wanted to go is wrong because it's maybe destructive in somebody else's life, then you either conform to that or, there's suffering around it.
Yeah, suffering and attachment is what I'm hearing. And then like looking at the way that it's in operation. And we know these things through traditional stuff, but here's the deal. It doesn't matter if we know this stuff. We continue to talk about it because we get amnesia every second of every day. We fall into the ego's trap all the time. And it's like, oh my God, did I really allow that to happen again? And then it just plays out over and over and over. And then when you think you got it, it slips away again. And so it's the presence of understanding, or being in the presence at all times, and recognizing what's ego, what's not ego, what's attachment, what's the suffering, how do I find the balance and bring myself back to harmony again, and use those scenarios in your life that surface to remind you that you have freedom, and that it's there to free you from those controlled minds. Now, it's good to have ego, right? It's good to have ego because we would all not be here if we didn't have ego, because it does allow us like what's right, what's wrong, that kind of thing. And like, at least from the laws of this particular time space, right? When like destroying other things in other places might be a good thing. When I was a kid, I actually had this cabbage patch radio, and then I wanted to see if I could what would happen if I put it in water. Good morning, whoever just got on here. But I used to put it in water just to see what would happen, and then I broke it, and then I laughed, and then I tried to make it right. And then my mom was really mad, and I just didn't care because I thought it was pretty cool that I could probably try to fix something. Anyway, so I understand that, demolishing things so that I can put them back together somehow. But at least I was trying to put them back together. I don't know if you were trying to put them back together, but I did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably what it was. You wanted to understand how it functioned, worked, and stuff. But then maybe you were not given the opportunity to try to fix it, and they didn't really know.
Well, I eventually learned how to fix my own PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
Because of it.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, taking parts of this PlayStation that worked and putting it in this PlayStation that didn't work.
Oh, well, see, there you go. Engineering.
It helps.
It helps. Destiny, what you got to say?
See, ego for me.
Try to go a little louder because of
yeah.
that podcast.
Oh, the podcast. So ego for me has always just, I deal with a lot of ego.
Yours or somebody else's?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
And I fight with my ego on a daily basis.
Oh, okay.
But I also deal with a lot of ego.
Okay.
And I've dealt with it a lot of my life. So for me, I've, like Curtis was saying, like building this, like, what your parents thought of who you are. And that becomes, that's one of my biggest, what's a part of my ego in the biggest way. And it's like perfection, you know, like that. I didn't realize how unhealthy trying to be perfect is. And I didn't realize that was a part of my ego, and understanding that, it is, and accepting it. This is exactly this is, not who I am, but unlearning that it's okay not to be perfect, and separating that from from myself, and, that doesn't define who I am, and, separating myself from it. So, yeah. But I do, yeah.
So the perfection, are striving to be perfect, and it doesn't feel free, right? Because we're talking about like the cage.
Exactly.
The cage and then uncaging, which is what we were talking about this morning, right?
Yeah.
So can you find freedom in the cage?
See, it kind of tricks you, because I dealt with that perfection aspect of part of a career was as a painter, and having to try to do this showroom quality, paint jobs all the time. And sometimes they didn't really come out exactly perfect how I wanted, but the other people were like, looks great. I don't, I don't see what the problem is. Looks fine. And I'm like, oh no, there's like a bunch of little imperfections. And so it taught me that someone else's perfect was also different than my perfect. And I set these like categories of what that would look like. And then when that wasn't hit, it was like the other side was suffering, and pretty big suffering, because it also, took a hit out of my paycheck when unnatural things affected the paint job, and I did everything that I could to prep it right. And then it would whatever. And then the perfection aspect, when it would go good and go right, it felt free. It's like, I did this is perfect, this is right, I'm feeling like this. Or you wake up and you're feeling good about how you look, or whatever, and then someone's like, what are you, tired? Like, you're like, it's like, so I look kind of like crap then. So when you're like floating on that freedom of everything's going right, and that's why this circumstance is good, when it's not right anymore and wrong, and it's not perfect, then that's when it's plummeting down to the other side of the pendulum.
And it's somebody else's eyes of what perfection is, which happens, I think, with some parents. It starts with the parents, really, but we also have it in leadership, right? Where it's like like you said, you have a job and you feel like you have to be perfect or you have to do all these things, and it's like, okay, so we have all of these things, right, that like come into our life, and we're dealing with this constantly. Now it's like, how do we transcend that? Right? Because that's the biggest thing. How do we take, good morning, mama. We have a whole show here. So I don't even know. I love this show because it's like, we don't know what we're doing, but it's okay. We do know what we're doing. We absolutely know.
We do know what we're doing.
You want to know what we did? You want to know what ego did this today for us? We had to put I put perfume. So I put on perfume, guys, so y'all could smell me.
So you could smell.
Because Kurt put cologne, and then I looked like I just woke up, and so my ego was like, "Oh no, girl, you got to look good." And I still look like I just rolled out of bed. But who cares? Whatever. It's about the content anyway. But it was kind of funny because that was total ego in operation. But here's the thing though, ego doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be fun and you can play with it as long as you understand that it's an operation. And how do we transcend it? Well, by not denying it. We don't have to deny it. We don't have to make it this bad thing. So if perfection is something you're striving for, right? Instead of looking at it like, oh, this thing of perfection, it's surrendering to the fact that nothing is ever going to be perfect. Nobody is perfect, period, end of story. And you can find that in anybody. So even the quote unquote person, so if you looked at it from the leader standpoint, if you go to a job and they want perfection, it's because they themselves hold a standard of perfection for themselves. So they are projecting upon you what they think that should happen. And then you have to understand that they are probably suffering, right? Even more than you because of their standard. Because how do I know? Because I'm like that. That's why I'm speaking from that space, because I am a perfectionist on every aspect of my life, but I stress the hell out of myself, which then gets projected on other people, which then they feel stressed out because they don't feel like they're reaching their standards of perfection in my eyes, which is really not their problem. It's my problem. But then it gets projected as it's their problem. And then I have to reevaluate. So here's the big trick. It's the reevaluation of what I'm projecting on others. This is what we call personal responsibility. This is where freedom comes in. Why? Because everybody says chill the F out. Chill out. You just need to chill out. You just need to relax. Guess what? My whole health regimen is telling me I need to relax because my cortisol's too high. Anywho, or low, or whatever. Like it's the cortisol's screwing up. It's unbalanced. It's my cortisol's jacked up. And why? Because I'm overly stressed. So I get it from that perspective. I also get it that where do I get? I should be there too. Yes, mama, you should be here too. And that I get that. Where do I get the perfection from? From my mama, who's actually on here. So yes, you should be here. And I'm just kidding. Where she has this idea of perfection, and then everybody, and I get tense. Everybody gets tense.
Then we're just all stress balls.
And we're stress balls.
It's fine.
It's fine. We're good. We're just going to teach you how to be good. You're like totally not good at all. I was like, oh my God, it was so funny. But that's why I do Spirit and Coffee, because authentically, I am willing to put myself out there and say I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect, but I strive for it. And then I stress everybody else out because of it. And I'm sorry. So I'm just saying sorry to these two at this point, because so that was the message here today. It wasn't ego. It's to apologize for my ego. No, I'm just kidding. So the perfection, yes, and striving for it, but also remembering that it's not, you can take it on as your energy, like you were talking from the beginning, and say, oh my God, now I got to be perfect because this person thinks I should be perfect. But you really, you can stand up for yourself and say, look, I'm doing the best that I'm doing, and this is how I know. If it's not good enough for you, I don't know what to tell you. This is, it's like, I'm going to try to be better, of course. Right. Because perfection is not a bad thing either. It's not like it's a good thing. It's healthy, but in good doses are good amounts.
It's good to set your own standards. And
perfect is.
Right. And then having boundaries around those standards, which is good. But then a healthy thought process for me to fall into, and what I chose to do was to understand every day that my thoughts are my business and someone else's thoughts are their own business. And if you were not, they were not saying those thoughts to you, then you don't need to worry about them. And just stay within your own mind space and do your best of your own visual of what that is, regardless of anyone else's opinion that they decide to give to you or not.
Stay in your lane, girlfriend. Okay? I'm actually talking to myself this whole time. Stay in your lane. Okay? Yes.
Mind your business.
Worry about yourself.
Worry about yourself, girl. Go take a shower. Yeah, maybe. Sorry. I'm just like, right in Curtis's face. I'm sorry, this is going through. Every time I have guests on, like Patrick, I would bring my friend Patrick on. Oh my God, we could never get through it because all we would do is la la gag and laugh, and it never made any sense.
We're live. Oh, sorry. No.
But that's not ego. That's like natural instinctive stuff. Yeah.
Allowing that to happen is a part of not caring.
Exactly, and that's the ego go.
Just now you're underarms.
This is raw. This
is raw. This is real life. This is not Kardashians. My biggest problem. Hi, Angela. She's not here. Hold on. I have to like put my whole face. Hey, Suzanne. I have to put my. What's up, girl? I'll put my whole face up in your face because I have to. The biggest problem is when I think. Please don't spit on me. I can read minds. Others should be able to read mine. Oh, yes.
Definitely.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, there may be something there, but for the most part, try to stay in your own mind.
Okay, let's talk about Curtis now. I was willing to put my perfection ego out there. Now we have a mind reader.
I'm not a mind reader. I'm just saying certain people could have these things and they're not just like, oh, imagining it or whatever. Sometimes it does, line up with something. But just for the most part, if you're in an argument or something, just try to stay in your own mind and be your own idea of what your best is. That's pretty much...
Let's talk about relationships. I'm sorry. This is funny.
Yeah, this is funny.
Because oh God, what is she gonna do? So relationship wise, I think I even said this on the last time. There's two things that I practice. One, patience, which is sometimes doesn't come out as patience, but I do. Trust me, I'm practicing it. Oof. And then the other one is shut up. Shut up. Sometimes you just zip it. And this is because ego will fight to be right. And that's another thing the ego does, right? It shows up, it wants to be right about. And if you allow yourself to go into neutrality in a relationship, like romantic relationship, in a other kind of relationship, niece, auntie relationship, is that you just... and then just let it play out. That's hard to do. It's really hard because you're like, I want this person to know what I'm trying to say. It's like, no. Because the person, like you said, is never going to understand what is in your head unless it's projected out. The experience is solely your experience.
Your perspective is supposed to be your perspective.
Exactly. Yes. And so... if you give space, if you allow for silence to exist, then the experience on the other side, you allow that person to experience what they need to experience and see it for what it is for them. And there's no words. You don't have to have words. And things start to flow naturally. Just natural alignment. But
and communicating that you don't want to speak and you don't want to talk and you need that space. And that, that's healthy as well, is saying, you know what, I don't want to talk right now. I'm gonna be silent, just so you know, not being rude about it, but letting them know, like, hey, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm just gonna sit here and observe for a little bit, or whatever the case is. But having that space is really important in a relationship, and especially a romantic relationship.
And what your process is, you need time or the space to allow your process to go, and that may look different than someone else's process and the time frame in which they do that.
Exactly. And understanding that from both sides, because that's important too.
I need a whole lot of time to process and silence. Look, here's the deal.
Yes.
There are like 2 processes happening. He's going to say there's 500 processes because I have all these different archetypal things. But 2 processes happen. I'm trying to process what a person's telling me, and then I'm trying to process my own internal dialogue. That internal dialogue is what's necessary for moi. I have to understand from my perspective, like I talk to myself. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Oh, this, oh, that. Why this? This is this. That is that. Blah, 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 blah. This is this. How did I do this? How did I create that? I said this and then this happened. And that triggered this response, but that's not what I wanted. So how did I do it? How did I do it? And then I calculate all these things.
Yeah. True story.
And then after I calculate it, I go, oh, now I can take personal responsibility, understand, and come back and talk calmly.
Yeah, there's a group of archetypes that work together in this science lab. That's like, they start processing stuff and pouring things into beakers, and they're breaking down everything, and then they're just like, yes. And that's what they come to me with, and I'm like, yes. Just this over analytical aspect of my mind that looks at it in so many different ways, and then it's like, well, then look at it through the butterfly effect and break it down and what happens then, and and then it comes to me with just some like simple thing like,
yep,
be quiet. Okay.
It's like all of this destruction for this little amount of.
Shut up.
Yeah, shut up. So in relationship, since Curtis and I are going to tell you, we practice shut the up. That's raw and real.
No,
and really, it's like you can do space. Can we read it?
I notice when communication with others, sometimes my questions for my own clarification sometimes are for protesting their points.
Oh, yeah.
Having a biased standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that also means, Angela, if you're still on here, that you have to be right about your point. Sometimes you have to surrender and say, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right in your own right. Or we agree to disagree. We're not going to see it the same way, and that's okay. But if you are seeing somebody else show up and you guys are fighting about whose point is right and there's an opposition, and you're trying to convince them that you're right, that's because you want to be right too. It's a mere reflection.
Even if you are right, even if you are,
yeah,
your delivery can be wrong, and it then comes out wrong and makes the situation more of a negative than equal or positive. But then having
everything about you is destruction. I'm just kidding.
No, not you. I'm just saying in general.
No, I know it's just funny. Everything he's saying is destruction. You're all destruction, and I'm like, I'm just kidding. It's a joke.
No, I know.
Oh. We good. We good.
We good.
We good. We good. Sorry.
I think even if you can recognize that you are wrong, or that even if you are right, having to prove that isn't always necessary. But then a healthy thought process for me was to kind of think about it like this. Do you think you know everything that there is to know about this angle or process of thought? And it's usually always no. So when you are aware that you don't know everything, that you're in the angle of what you're speaking at, and I mean everything, then it's a good idea to just keep the mind open in an aspect of maybe I can learn something new if it's not making sense. And this person, very healthily believes that they're right. And, I healthily believe that I'm right, but it's just, there's room for opportunity there in the right delivery.
Yes. And another thing that happens is language. Sometimes so I have this, and I have this with you sometimes.
Me no speak English.
So sometimes Pablo. Sometimes we have this, but the one person that comes to mind mostly is my friend Daniel. He and I would get into debates, and he has to be right about everything, and he'll scientifically break it down to the tiny littlest molecule, the big words and all this stuff. And then at the end of the day, we realize we're saying the same thing with different words. So sometimes when you're communicating with an individual, if you don't listen to their full point of view, right, in its entirety, then you don't understand, what they're really trying to say. Because sometimes people don't have the right words to articulate the experience or to articulate what's happening. And because of that, we think in our head, like Angela, you said, in your mind, you start to think you understand what's going on. I do that sometimes too. And I'll be like, wait, and it's like, no, listen, okay, fine. And sometimes it takes a long time for people to really get out what they're trying to say until they get to the point and there's clarity. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I think. But it didn't sound like that when we were talking. Why? Because the words that we're expressing it in sound different, but it's the same belief. It's the same thing. And my friend Daniel and I would constantly come to that, but we had different words to describe what we were experiencing and realizing that we were talking about the same thing with different words. So there's that too. So it's funny. We started with ego. We're talking about communication because communication is the big key, right? To all of this. So, and it circles back around. So we have those times. And, it's just understanding. So again, and then also always being the fool.
Yeah.
Like always, I call it being the fool, not like you're an idiot fool, but like always being a beginner, right? Let's see, hold on. Let's see.
The breakthrough that I had
we got a big long thing
yesterday was that when you choose to be silent in certain circumstances, you kind of just allow the instinctive flow to happen. And when you have intentions that cannot be expressed through movement or silence, then words come into play as just a fundamental role when you take ego out of it. So when you're not like,
I like that.
Oh, I like this, I like that, I like this, you should too. Mm-hmm. You just are doing what you are doing because you like to do that, and you're not, you know what I mean? And in your silence, this person can experience that differently from having maybe no pressure or no precursor aspects of thought about it, and they can experience it raw and instinctively and fundamentally. When you're just like, oh, this is the best thing, this is awesome because of your perspective, and then you present it to somebody and they're like, it's all right. It's just letting someone experience something.
You felt?
Letting someone experience something through movement and understanding the intention without the words. Words then become so much more powerful when you do speak and choose to speak, because it's basic fundamental of intention that you get across.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. No, it's not okay.
I don't.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was
See?
just.
Okay. I thought it was a scenario played out. See, there I go in my mind.
See, and what I keep going back to, like with all of this, is neutral. So like yesterday was what I was experiencing with Curtis was he was just being neutral. He was open to hearing everyone out. He wasn't talking, you know, but being in that neutral space, knowing what neutral is and understanding that we can go into neutral and have a conversation to understand all aspects of what you're saying, understanding what I'm thinking and my opinions, and every other situation in between, not just my situation, not my opinion and what I'm thinking, and not the opinion of what you're thinking or whatever the case is, but every other scenario possible. So being neutral to, you know, in the conversation and just surrendering and letting it, you know, just flow. I realized being in neutral and having any conversation is probably the best, because you have the most open mind, you learn more. Like she said, you become a beginner. So always being, you know, accepting that I can keep learning from everyone, and, you know, separating that from I know everything, you know.
Oh, I just love you. Oh, I love you. Yes. Because the neutral. Hold on, we have another one here. Let me read Vinny's real quick, and then we'll read hers. I'm going to read your stuff, Vinny. Give me just a moment here.
Do you want to enlarge it a little bit on that side?
Oh, just do it. Let's see. Oops. Yeah, maybe I should. Sorry. Just listen to. Okay. Well, when one doesn't know everything, it's better for him to listen, and elders, rather than speaking about it to anyone, one should learn a lot, and that's what matters. It takes time to have a complete open-minded thinking in the world. Yeah. So being patient and learning everything, understanding everything really helps a person a lot. If a person doesn't know, and if he keeps speaking, then it's obvious he will get the open-minded viewpoint, which he or she never heard of. Absolutely. So the one who's silent gets more out of it, to be honest with you. So when you drop into silence, you get more out of it than the person speaking. Why? Because the person speaking only knows their thoughts. They can't hear anything else.
You're taking your projected vibration out of the equation.
Yeah.
It's literal, you know, measurable energy that you're producing into the circumstance. And if you take that out, it's not as powerful. There's not as much energy there projected, positive or negative, when there's just complete silence on both parts.
Yep. And it's neutral. I love that neutrality he says it's a kind of a equal to empty vessel, make more sound. Exactly. And let's see what Tony says. Steve and I have a healthy relationship because we don't talk politics, and we respect the fact that everyone has different opinions or perspectives. Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. It's really, to get there sometimes is not easy. Like, so for relationship, right, and understanding relationship, which is something that I'm really trying to understand, it's been very, very weird, but that's okay. It's good. It's good and weird. It's good. It's good weird. It's good weird. That it's funny because what Curtis and I have been working on is effective communication, right? Like, how do you communicate effectively in relationship? And let me just say that him and I, okay, I'm going to say he and I together were failing epically at it. It was really epic. It was really kind of cool, actually.
It has been. Someone like, you know, on the outside.
It's actually pretty hilarious because we're like writing a module together about effective communication and can create all this curriculum and standpoints that work. And and then can't communicate certain things to each other in the same sense. And we just, whenever we're having, trouble, we're just like, well, how are we supposed to teach this if we can't teach this? And then we break it down, and then we get to the core of it and the fundamentals, and then we get back to it, and then we're like, okay, yeah, we're good. We can, we can feel like we can teach someone in and out of this circumstance now. You know what I mean?
And the best one is practice. Zip it up. I told him that. Like when I said, this is what I do. And I said as a teacher, because I don't just in relationship, I do it with other relationships as well, but it's a little different.
She didn't tell me to shut the up.
No, I said I do.
She said that that's a practice that she uses. Right.
Yeah.
But I've, known that that's been a necessary practice for me sometimes just because I'm passionate. I'm passionate when I speak about things of certain, areas, and that's what the ego of that part was or is,
I need to understand this energy passion. Because the way I see passion, there's perspective again. Like his passion, like when I think passion, I'm like, yeah, let's go, girlfriend. And then, no, that ain't the passion he's talking about, but that's not how I view the passion, okay? Woo. Girl. Okay, so ooh, chilly.
I've just been more of a loud individual. It's my life. More, sports oriented and martial arts, the tournaments, the soccer games, playing football, the football games, just like being a parent and a coach. Like you're on the sidelines, you're go past it. You're screaming at the top of your lungs, and it's like great energy. It's good intention, but it's really loud, and it's a high vibration, and it's very passionate. And certain times it's not necessarily like, also if you look at certain preachers, even they're blah 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 and the Lord they get all the
and the Lord said, child. Okay, so I get it from
it's
the
just
baptism,
that kind of
like
passion, being raised Southern Baptist and playing sports and coaching sports and teaching sports my whole life. That energy is in me. Get him, coach, good job, all the time. And sometimes,
if you smack my ass after all that, that's okay. Good game. And then I'll be like, yes, that's the passion I'm talking about. Don't spit on me at any time, please. This is real life TV.
No, about the religion and politics standpoint, I've kind of stood on those beliefs most of my life.
Sorry.
Is to just kind of stay out of really all conversations with most people about religion or politics, just because that's such a sensitive thing over history. That's just fueled a lot of tension, separation, segregation, and wars, really. So it's like, to a certain extent, I just, I've opted out for most of my life in conversations. Just, people are like, oh, but this. And I'm like, well, I just opt out of, talking about it or the whole thing. I just choose not to talk about it with anybody, just because really, I'm not educated enough or care enough to get educated enough to have a standpoint on it. Not that I don't feel that it's important. It just, for me, it's just not what's natural flow and
it's not what you focus on in your life. You have other things to focus on.
So having that kind of a standpoint is more of a peaceful approach towards it, and just not wanting to. But that also frustrates people sometimes too, and they're like, "How can you not?" Blah blah blah. Well, it's just my choice, But
yeah, just give them hugs. Just hug, because we're in Kerberland, and that's what we do. We hug. Kerberland. I hug things out.
As long as I don't know, I feel for myself, as long as I'm not like I am this and I am that and I am, having all these emotional identification standpoints for the ego to step in and be like, did you hear what they just said against what that I am statement you said? This is what you said you are. And like, you hear what they said? What do you got to say about that? And then your ego's like, oh, well, hold on a minute.
Yes.
And then it just starts doing whatever based off of your I am identities, what you're,
You just say, I am that I am, and then sit there. And you know what? Because that was like the next level stuff.
Yeah.
It's like taking that I am, sitting there in silence and observing it all. That's like the cool place, right? That is like, it's for instance, it's like in relationship when you practice not saying anything. There's two ways, well, there's a lot of different ways it can go, but with me, it goes, you're ignoring me. You have nothing to say. Well, I love you. Like literally, that's the only thought in my head. But there has to be more. But there's not more. There's just, I love you. I don't understand. What more do you want? I love you. Rah, 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 rah. Oh, what do you have to say?
I love you.
I love you. Okay. No, there's more. No, there's not more. Right? There's a lot for Vinny we can read. But it's an observation that frustration for the ego wants to fight, and that's how I see it, is that the ego is wanting to fight. It wants to be right. It wants to, and when it has nowhere else to go, internally is the only place it can go. If an individual is speaking from ego and you go silent and they don't hear their own dialogue coming out, and you still don't say anything, then when they separate from you, they have to talk to themselves. Who else are they going to talk to? The ego, or they'll call a friend, because that doesn't work. Literally what I'm saying is just talk to yourself.
Right. If you break it all the way down and can justify it fundamentally, then I think that, that would work for your life. But if you're at that place and you can't justify your behavior and everything around that, then, maybe it needs a little tweaking on your own, initiative if you want it to be better. If not, then you can keep having that same pattern over and over again. But taking, if there's two parts to the equation and you can take yourself as far back as you can to gain perspective, you can see all the avenues that you can take to that. And probably the most productive one is shutting up.
Yeah.
In most cases, and just letting it go on.
That's what I do. Well, I'm a hairdresser. So I do a lot of people's hair that have a lot of different opinions. And so when I'm working and they want to talk about politics or they want to talk about religion, what I've learned is we don't talk about religion or politics in the salon. But if that's something they want to talk about the whole entire time that they are there, I be quiet and I don't say anything. And that's when I become the observer and I just observe the information. And it's like, okay, I don't agree with this, but there's truth in this. And depicting what is right and what is wrong and knowing, and being that neutral standpoint. Again, that keeps coming up.
Yeah, for you. Yeah. And then you pick out what's important to you, what works for you and all that.
Exactly.
So let's read some.
Okay, let's read what Vinny said and then we'll wrap it up.
I've never been to a relationship, so I won't share the basic stuff like they are based off of trust, communication, and all, because I'll be able to speak about it and
more
clearly, and I will get
in relationship.
Yeah,
it cuts off. So, and that's when I will be able to get specific and a lot better. In India, we not only have love, but we arrange marriage. Yes, you do. I lived in India, Vinny. And so I understand completely. But you guys have a whole different, so this is also a big thing. It's worldviews and how people view communication and love relationships, which is a little bit different, right? Do you want to read that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
not having. Ooh, thank you.
saying I don't have much of a sports life. I was a bookworm, and I love to study. Being concentrated and dedicated, inspired and motivated to study since childhood I loved it the most. Well, there was a lot of students in my school who were good in both sports and studies. For me, sports didn't work out. I love the outdoor games and being badminton, and I love indoor, and then research about India's politics. Cool.
So you're an academic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Conversation should be clean and out of all such stuff, person is not willing and waiting for. Good morning, Renee.
Thank you for sharing.
Good morning, Tony. I'm going to say good morning, Tony, but thank you. Yes, thank you for sharing. Good morning.
For me, I was really, really, really big into sports and the whole sports life and doing and playing every sport that I could back when I was young. And then after I got out of school, this whole academic aspect of learning knowledge as much as I possibly could into areas that I wanted to learn it in. And it's taken, since I was about 18 or 19, I was introduced to a certain form of information and then took that to just wanting to study more and as long and as many books since I've read since that one point. I still enjoy physical activity, but, I don't choose to play sports because I have to work and my body isn't what it used to be. So.
I used to cheer. So I would cheer on your sports. Ready, go. Go, Curtis, go. Go, Curtis, go. Yeah. Oh, then I punch him out. They're all, woo. Just kidding. Sorry, I'm making my head. Okay, so Tony says, hi, welcome to the family. She wants you to go visit. She's the one in Florida. So yes, we will be taking a trip out there, I promise you. And we will go to Harry Potter Land. Okay, so we've got to wrap this up because I typically don't go an hour, but of course we have all these beautiful people show up, so they all have opinions and they get to talk, and so it's going to go longer, of course. Of course, I could talk for like 500 billion hours.
Only.
Only. I have about 1 billion hours of talking on this thing. But we are so excited. I think that the module and manual that Curtis and I are creating in terms of effective communication is going to change a bit based on our experience of understanding each other. And I think one of the practices is going to be shut. And we're literally going to label it that. Like it's going to be labeled that, and we're going to tell people you all need to learn how to shut up. That's it. And then just shut up for a whole day and see what happens with the relationship. Well, I really love this show. Thanks, Vinny, and we appreciate you continuing to show up. I do have a new YouTube channel as well, so you guys can go subscribe to that if you want to see it on YouTube or if you want to upload the videos, whatever you want to do, share the videos. Also,
like, subscribe, share,
everything, and then also I'm on iHeartRadio as well. And so Spirit and Coffee now has a home in iHeartRadio, so you guys are welcome to go there to listen. I've chucked into Pandora. Hopefully Pandora will pick it up as well. And we're just going to continue to grow. Fingers crossed. No, it is the website.
Feel free to connect and reach out if at any point there's any part of information you want clarity on or just have questions in general that you think that either of us could help with. There's ways to connect on all platforms, and if not, you can just send a message and we can figure out the best path to take from that point. So thank
We're
you.
living the life. This is authentic, raw, real stuff, just so you know. So there you go. Salud to you guys. Cheers. Yay. Love you. Mean it.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, we'll do this one first. And then we'll do that one. And stream. And, press send.
Good morning, everybody.